Bom dia a todos, sejam bem-vindos à aula de hoje. Good morning to everyone, welcome to this morning's class. It's great to have you back, and it's an immense pleasure to welcome our guest speakers for today. So I'd like to welcome Nanci Pittelkow, who is an activist of the homeless workers movement, the MTST. She's been in the organization since 2018, and she works in the political formation sector. She coordinates the program Barraco, a live stream that debates academic works about the MTST and groundwork with popular thinkers and educators. She's a journalist with a degree from the School of Communication and Arts of the University of São Paulo, ECA in USP, writer and scriptwriter. She has worked in the areas of corporate communication, public relations, and currently works in independent journalism. So it's great to have you here, Nanci. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to bring the MTST point of view, experience, perspective to this class. And I'd like to welcome and thank Professor Munir Nuseibah. He's a human rights lawyer and academic based at Al-Quds University, Jerusalem. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation, Munir. He's an assistant professor at Al-Quds University's Faculty of Law, the director and co-founder of Al-Quds Human Rights Clinic, the first accredited clinical legal education program in the Arab world, and the director of the Community Action Center in Jerusalem. He holds a BA degree in law from Al-Quds University and LLM in International Legal Studies from the Washington College of Law of the American University in Washington, D.C., and a PhD degree from the University of Westminster in London, UK, where he acquired after successfully defending his thesis entitled Forced Displacement in the Palestinian-Israeli Conflict, International Law and Transitional Justice. So thank you very much, both of you, for attending this class. Basically, the idea is that you will present your experiences and point of view all around forced displacement, ethnic cleansing. Nanci will begin speaking about the MST experience in São Paulo. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. First of all, I'm very grateful for Aline's invitation. I also thank the presence of all of you. My English is not exactly fluent, so I will try my best to be understood. It's kind of rusty. For this, I have Lorenzo here with me, a colleague from my sector, to help me with doubts and blackouts. And well, as I did not follow an academic career, for I'm a journalist, my presentation will be more of a report, okay? I'm here representing the homeless workers movement of Brazil, Movimento dos Trabalhadores Sem Teto, MTST. In this presentation, I will refer to the movement through its acronym MTST, or simply the movement. I am a part of its political formation sector, as Arlene said. In the last class, you talked to Cássia Bechara of MST, correct? Well, the MTST was born from a strategy of the MST to start taking part in the urban struggle. Can you pass the slide, please? Before talking the beginning of the MTST and presenting a short history of the movement, let's talk about the struggle for housing. In Brazil, many rights are denied, and housing is among the main ones. Housing, or the lack of security of a large part of the population in relation to having a place to live, is an expensive demand and an important mobilizing factor. We don't have recent updated statistics for Brazil today, but the housing deficit is estimated to reach more than 10% of the population. This means about 20 million people who effectively need a roof over their heads. How do all these people live? Obviously, not all of them live on the streets. Homeless people have reached the limit of exclusion caused by unemployment, lack of decent housing, and mental illness caused by lack of opportunities. Most of the homeless in Brazil are not living on the streets, but they are workers, even if informally and without legal rights. And next, please. And who are the homeless? Most of them, including those who are in the movement, are people who live with relatives. Let's take an example. Ejane Maria is a member of the MTST, and she was elected for a legislative seat in the state of São Paulo last year, 2022. And she still lives in the back of her former mother-in-law house with 4 children. Next. The second group come those who spend too much on rent. That is, who stop buying food and other basic needs to be able to pay the rent and not live on the streets. This is a common situation. There is also a part that lives in poor constructions, slums, and tenements. With such a large number of people in insecure situations, housing is a necessity that attracts people to the political struggle. Now, let's see how the MTST started and what are its methods. Can you pass? Thank you. In 1994, President Fernando Henrique Cardoso was elected. He advanced the implementation of a neoliberal economic policy which began to deepen social inequality and poverty. In this period, the EMST also started to organize urban workers in the struggle for better living conditions. Thus, in 1997, the MTST emerged as the urban branch of the rural MST. The first occupations of MTST took place in Campinas, Guarulhos, and São Bernardo do Campo, cities in the state of São Paulo, close to the capital and close to the highways. In 2000, President Cardoso, or FHC, as we say here, issued an anti-invasion measure, which forbade the evaluation and inspection of occupied lands and excluded rural workers who took part in these occupations in the countryside from the land reform program. He stopped it, the land reform program for these people. What about housing in this period? There are no housing programs capable of meeting the demands of the poorest people. Next. How did we fight in this period? Besides occupying areas in cities close to the capital of São Paulo, we used to do the urban barricade. That is, we used to block the highways. The idea was to affect power and capital, preventing goods from reaching the city. That is why the occupations took place on the outskirts of the metropolis. So in 2003, the ruling party in São Paulo, the right-wing PSDB, understood the strategy of the MTST and retaliated violently carrying out truculent repossessions of occupied land. Because of these evictions, in 2004, the MTST had lost all its occupations and felt the need to change its methods of fighting for housing. Next, please. Thank you. President Lula had been elected 2 years before, in 2002. The workers were euphoric. They believed that a popular government and a president coming from the people could combat homelessness, finally. In 2005, the MTST reborn with the Chico Mendes occupation, gathering 800 families. Through the new experience of this occupation, the movement has managed to accumulate strength to continue the struggle, independently of concentration of people in a specific plot of land. Thus, even after eviction, people would remain organized in order to claim their right to housing. Next, please. And what about the houses? The federal government program, Minha Casa Minha Vida, or My House, My Life, was born in 2009. However, the movement needed to fight so that the program would include those who could not pay for housing under the rules of the real estate market. The struggle of the MTST and other movements has forced the government to grant subsidies so that the poorest people could also get a house by paying only what would fit in their budget. The first conquest has taken place in 2014 with the construction of the João Cândido condominium, which was the result of an occupation that arose in 2007 through a subpart of that government program, My House, My Life entities. Next, please. And after the Arab Spring in 2010 and Occupy Wall Street in 2011, in Brazil, we had the June protests, which took place in 2013. At this time in Brazil, the Workers' Party government was building large projects for the Olympic Games and Soccer World Cup, even expropriating several low-income communities. This had consequences for the real estate market. The valorization of the central urban regions caused a displacement of the poorest population to even more peripheral regions. And even in these areas, rents were rising sharply. In São Paulo, the average price of the real estate multiplied almost threefold in 5 years. Rents almost doubled in the same period. Meanwhile, the construction of low-income housing was paralyzed. Next, please. What changed for the MTST? As I have said, large mobilizations have taken place in Brazil in 2013. First, starting from protests against the rise of the bus fare in São Paulo. People from different social classes started to see the streets demonstrations as a space for their demands and agendas, both from the left and the right. Because of the combination of dissatisfaction and the difficulty of paying rent, the periphery also has taken part of the struggle. in its own way by occupying empty lots in remote neighborhoods. At this moment, the MTST took advantage of the political effervescence and the people's revolt. So it started new occupations all over Brazil. Before 2013, there was a rhythm of 3 to 5 occupations per year, but there were more than 10 occupations in 2013 alone. The MTST also organized demonstrations that questioned the staging of the soccer World Cup in order to point out the lack of public policies for the most needed. At this time, the movement began to be recognized all over the country and out of the country too. It is in this context that MTST occupied the land for the first time in the capital of São Paulo, including the occupations Faixa de Gaza and Vila Nova Palestina. Only the occupations Vila Nova Palestina in the Jardim Ângela neighborhood, located at the extreme south of São Paulo, more than 8,000 families have joined the struggle. I will say more about this occupation in a while. Next. But why is occupying a method for the MTST? The Brazilian Constitution was promulgated in 1988, after the end of the civil military dictatorship and the democratization. It includes in Article 5, in short, the Constitution assures the right to private property. However, in subsection 23, it states, property shall serve its social function. That is, a landowner cannot keep land or building without use under the terms of the law. So, in subsection 24, we have the rules for expropriation. It means that the government is the government that must expropriate and compensate the owner. In practice, what happens is that expropriations would never happen without political pressure from the people organized in occupations that flag land that does not fulfill its social function. All the achievements of the MTST and of the MST are the result of occupations, demonstrations, protests, and years of negotiation and struggle of the landless and the homeless. Next. And why do we call occupations New Palestine Village and Gaza Strip? In 2012 and 2013, Brazilian diplomacy began to support the Palestinian state. At this time, the leftist social movements, which already saw the Palestinian struggle as a sister struggle, began to make this support explicit in their symbols. The MTST usually baptizes its occupations with names of historical Brazilian fighters. But it felt natural in that moment that the Palestinian struggle would be honored. I show here an example of this. And this is a commemorative publication in Occupations Residents Group, which happened precisely on the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, Today, November 29, is the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. 6 years ago, tonight, the Vila Nova Palestina occupation was born, an MTST occupation that received this name in solidarity with and in honor of the Palestinian resistance. There is still too much to conquer, many battles to win, and a beautiful history of struggle to be written. The struggle has no borders. Free Palestine, long live Vila Nova Palestina. Today, the residents live in great anxiety because the disputed land has been declared a social interest zone since 2016. The previous mayor committed to starting construction this year, 2023. Now, the current mayor wants to draw off on what had already been negotiated. So they are very anxious. But I think you will better understand our struggle from the words of our own militants and residents of the occupation. I have brought here one video of them for this presentation. Thank you very much, and I will ask for Victoria to pass the film, and thank you for the listen.
Hoje para Vila Nova Palestina.
Melhor, uma construção boa que libere as coisas, está tudo amarrado e que tudo dê certo.
Onde você morava antes da Vila Nova Palestina?
Vila Calu, pagava aluguel.
O que mais falta para você hoje?
A moradia própria. No momento que a gente foi para Nova Palestina é a construção mais rápido possível para que saia nossas casas, né? Porque por pagar aluguel que nós estamos morando aqui. Entendeu?
O mais rápido possível a liberação da construção das casas.
Tem as casas, né? As casas pra gente morar.
Liberação da construção.
Da construção, isso.
O que mais falta para o senhor hoje?
Emprego e moradia.
O que você sonha para Vila Nova Palestina hoje?
Que eles adiantam logo as construções da moradia.
São Paulo é a cidade do cachorro, é uma cidade sem dono, entendeu? É uma cidade que quem comanda é os governantes e os patrões. Não tem pra gente, não tem chão. Estava tendo a ocupação no Valo Velho, na João Cândido. Minha mãe passou e falou assim: olha, você gosta de fazer teatro e você está aqui se acabando, vai lá para dentro ajudar o pessoal. Eu não entrei, na época não entrei por moradia, mesmo não tendo onde ficar, tinha acabado de separar, não sei onde ficar, e voltei para casa da minha mãe que morava no aluguel. Eu fui para dentro da ocupação, mas para um escape mesmo, para não ir para o lado errado. E fiquei. Aí, depois de eu estava com uma semana, entrei para a coordenação do movimento. Uma semana de movimento. Aí foi que eu comecei a fazer luta para colocar minha mãe em um lugar, tentando aproveitar que eu já estava na luta por moradia, aprender como é que funcionava, porque eu vim de uma família que não aceita a ocupação, a invasão, não aceita isso. Meu pai, principalmente. Mas meu pai não aceita, minha mãe paga aluguel. Eu falei alguma coisa errada, né? Eu sei que meu pai sempre procurou ensinar o caminho certo, mas ele também não sabia de tudo. Então eu vi que o caminho que eu estava dava para conquistar alguma coisa. Não é dado, não é de graça. A gente tem que lutar muito, todos os dias, viver na luta. E graças a Deus hoje minha mãe está dentro do apartamento dela, está pagando, mas está dentro do apartamento dela com essa luta do movimento. Não tem como não lutar, né? É aceitar uma luta com dignidade, uma luta melhor, porque pobre não tem como não nascer e não lutar. A gente luta para sobreviver, luta para comprar o pão, luta para pagar o aluguel, luta para pegar um ônibus, luta para voltar para onde quer que seja, mesmo que não seja nosso, mas a gente luta para voltar para nossa família. Então a gente nasce lutando, porque é negado não só moradia, não é negado só saúde, transporte, mas a educação também. A gente é muito privado de educação, então às vezes a gente não sabe lutar por não ter educação. Não ter uma educação de qualidade para saber os caminhos da lei que a gente possa fazer com que isso funcione. O meu sonho é que já era para ter acontecido, né? Que fosse cumprido o que o Haddad assinou. E a Vila Nova Palestina, quando a gente foi para lá, ela tem 1 milhão de metros quadrados. É uma área da faixa da Guarapira, e na faixa ali tem somente 10% que era liberado para moradia. No governo Haddad, se eu não me engano, em 2014, a gente conseguiu transformar numa área de ZEIS e que passasse para moradia 30%, em torno de 300 mil metros quadrados da área. O equivalente a 3.500 apartamentos. Gente, não é muito, porque precisa de moradia. O povo precisa. Mas se fizesse os projetos que já foi passado para a gente no Vila Nova Palestina, com preservação, com parque, com funcional, a moradia com o ecológico, para mim, se saísse do papel aquilo, para mim já estaria maravilhoso. Se saísse do papel, se alguma coisa que tenha para saísse do papel sem precisar de tanta luta, porque ali está em 2013 na luta. E por mais que tenha projeto, que tenha saído muita coisa, a gente continua na luta com o governo em cima daquela área, né? Parece que a faixa de Gaza mesmo, né?
morava em Itacirica, era Serra. Morava de favor na casa da minha avó. Mãe que morava de favor na casa da minha avó. Como a Vila Nova Palestina está próxima de onde foi a ocupação João Cândido, que é extremo sul da Zona Sul, lá pro lado de Jardim Ângela, Capela, Calu, a gente era de lá. A ocupação João Cândido era da Vila Calu, na divisa entre São Paulo e Itacirica. A Vila Nova Palestina fica a 20 minutos da onde foi a nossa ocupação, onde a gente morou mesmo na ocupação. E quando organizou aquela ocupação ali na Boimirim, a gente foi chamado para participando, para ajudar na organização, na entrada principalmente. E eu lembro hoje, porque foi no dia 29 para 30 de novembro, numa sexta-feira, e a gente foi para lá para poder ajudar a organizar, porque a gente distribui bambu, distribui lona, né? Precisa organizar as pessoas. Uma área muito grande e abandonada, sem um destino, né, para moradia, para nada, na realidade, um terreno abandonado, um terreno muito grande, muita gente precisando. A gente sabe que existe dois lados na periferia, né? O lado que quer lutar e o oportunista, né? O déficit habitacional lá na Zona Sul é muito difícil. A gente acabou de ver o Ocupa Centro, que foi por causa da Palestina, porque o prefeito está querendo morder o terreno, né? Um terreno muito bom. Se ele for destinado à moradia, a gente sabe que não vai ser construído barraco, não vai ser construído uma favela, vai ser construído um condomínio. Eu tenho esperança, sim, de daqui mais uns 2 anos a gente passar ali pela Boimirim e ver um condomínio maravilhoso com as pessoas de luta ali daquele terreno, porque tem gente ali que entrou, tá ali desde o começo, né?
Você é de São Paulo?
Da Bahia.
Da Bahia. Quando você veio pra cá?
Tem tempo, hein? Acho que tem uns 20 anos por aí ou mais.
Você sente que, assim, São Paulo é uma cidade que te acolheu, que te recebeu bem, ou sempre se sentiu meio deslocado na cidade?
É bem difícil essa, né? Bom, eu acho que assim, você acolhe, ao mesmo tempo você é muito distante as coisas, né? O trabalho da periferia, essas coisas. Mas vamos seguindo a vida.
Você sente que São Paulo é a sua cidade?
No momento sim. No momento sim. Eu tô aqui, né? Então.
E como é que tá a situação da Vila Nova Palestina?
Bom, a Palestina é uma ocupação que ela já vem se arrastando para 10 anos, né? Tem o povo, o pessoal que mora lá, né? Diretamente, os moradores. E assim, é uma coisa que é que nem a gente fala, matar um leão por dia e amarrar o outro por outro dia, porque senão não é uma coisa.
Como é que você chegou na ocupação? Como é que foi essa... Você conheceu e resolveu ir para lá?
Bom, quando eu fui 3 dias depois, fiquei sabendo através de uns vizinhos meus que eles foram no dia. Aí me chamaram, eu falei para eles, cara, eu não vou, isso não tá certo e tal. Aí, não, vamos lá ver e tal. Eu falei, não, beleza, vamos sim. Aí eu fui lá, conversei com o pessoal da coordenação, eles explicaram como que funciona e o movimento não cobra nada de ninguém, que a única coisa que o movimento pede é uma participação na luta e se você puder, lógico, uma doação, um feijão, for fazer falta, um arroz, qualquer coisa assim. E aí eu comecei a ver e continuei lá. Aí comecei a fazer as coisas com o pessoal, organizar a ocupação, puxar água, luz, essas coisas. Arrumar barraco, fazer mutirão. E hoje estou aí até agora.
O que você sonha para Vila Nova Palestina?
Que ela construa o mais rápido possível. Construa a moradia do pessoal o mais rápido possível. Eles são 10 anos de luta. O povo que está ali precisa sim da moradia, porque 10 anos não são 10 dias. Então, quem está ali é guerreiro mesmo. Senão não estava mais não.
Ocupamos pelos legítimos direitos injustamente negados, sonegados.
Ocupamos porque plantamos, mas não podemos comer. Fabricamos, mas não podemos comprar. Construímos, mas não podemos morar.
Falta saúde, já arrancada no berço, proletária não tem tempo de amamentar. Esperamos em fila. Quem irá de nossos filhos cuidar?
Faltam escolas, educação em migalhas. Sempre ao fio da navalha, formatado em mais-valia. Trabalhador só pode estudar para aprender as máquinas operar. Conhecer e direcionar ficou para os filhos da burguesia.
Falta moradia. Esse nosso maior direito. Jogados nos morros, então, empreiteiras apostam bilhões no jogo da especulação. Só somos lembrados em dias de pleito.
Já ocupamos navios, capitanias, cercanias, vilarejos, quilombos, cortiços, escombros, bairros e terras. Estamos hoje em vielas, favelas, juntando alegrias na grande nação periferia.
Ocupamos e ocuparemos a história esquecida, sem memória, a que não se ensina na escola. Porque edificamos tudo que aí está. Porque nunca paramos de lutar e trabalhar.
Somos muitos. Somos tantos e tantas dificuldades amplas, somos mães, pais, ambulantes, feirantes, pedreiros, pintores, babás, enfermeiras, operadores, auxiliares, vendedores, pastores, pensadores, artistas, violeiros, cantores, jardineiros, confeiteiros, gestores, poetas, motoristas, frentistas, atores, médicos, professores, educadores, domésticas, dançarinas, estudantes, freelancers, escritores, narradores e boias frias.
Movimentamos o dia e a noite, muitas vezes embaixo de açoites. Não desistimos. Temos fibra e orgulho de saber que somos trabalhadores, garantindo o preço, porque somos os verdadeiros donos do mundo.
Thank you for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I enjoyed learning from your experience. So my name is Munir Nuseibah, and I work at Al-Quds University. I teach international law at Al-Quds University, but I also head a center called Community Action Center that provides legal aid to Palestinians in the old city of Jerusalem. And I feel it's important to give a background about my work, especially the Community Action Center in this case, because my center is involved on a continuous basis with providing legal aid on areas where the Israeli legal system targets and persecutes the Palestinian population, especially in Jerusalem. My presentation today will be focusing on the different ethnic cleansing measures that the Israeli legal system and political system has been using since the Nakba, and we are now around 3 days after the anniversary of the Nakba, the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, since the Nakba until today. So next slide, please. My presentation will be focusing on the different measures that have been taken since 1948 until today. Of course, they will not cover everything, but this cartoon, drawn by a Palestinian cartoon artist, says the Arabic words above say قانون الإبعاد, which mean the law of deportation. And I find it very expressive to put it here because you can see how it does express and reflect how the Israeli legal system itself, and it's not one law actually, it's several laws, focus on the displacement of the Palestinian people on a continuous basis, because basically when Israel was started and built in 1948 on 78% of the Palestinian land, the Jewish population in Palestine was already a minority, and the idea of creating a Jewish state meant for those who created the state that a majority should happen. And since 1948 until the current day, we have been witnessing different displacement measures that the Israeli governments in plural and the Israeli legal system have been introducing. Next slide, please. So I will start by giving this background. In when the Nakba happened in 1947 to 49, it's usually famous as the 1948 Nakba. The population of the Palestinian population in Palestine was basically 70% were non-Jewish, 30% were Jewish, and the idea was to create a Jewish state, and therefore the Zionist organization, which is the organization that carried the idea of creating this Jewish state, and collaborated with the United Kingdom, which occupied Palestine in 1917, to transfer, to bring Jewish immigration to Palestine. This organization already had planned for transfer of Palestinians at the earliest possible opportunity. And of course, the war of 1948 was that opportunity. And during this war, 80% of the population of the areas that on which the state of Israel was established, which is, it's a part of Palestine, were displaced. 80% of the population, of the Palestinian population, of course, only were displaced. And this is how Israel managed to make a Jewish majority. Next slide, please. This happened as a result of, the background of this is that in 1947, the United Nations recommended the partition of Palestine into two states, according to the map on the left. But the map on the right shows the actual displacement, the actual conquering that Israel managed to conquer, which was 78% of the total area of Palestine. Next slide, please. As part of this conquering, the western part of Jerusalem was also conquered and occupied by Israel in 1948. And today, there are almost there is no Palestinian population in the western part of Jerusalem. Israel demolished almost all of the villages, the Palestinian villages in the western part of Jerusalem, and a total of 500, more than 500 villages in all of Palestine in the war of 1948, total demolition. But in West Jerusalem, the fate of the Palestinian villages that were in the western area of Jerusalem were either full demolition, where you can find that these locations and these beautiful villages that are sitting on water springs have become, maybe parks, like the picture on the left, or a partial demolition, like Lifta, the picture on the right top of this slide, or they kept the houses as they are in many instances actually. But they exchanged the population that lives there from the Palestinian population to a Jewish population, like the one in the bottom right of this picture. So whether the villages were destroyed or not, the Palestinian owners of the houses were certainly displaced, but this was also the city of this, the fate of the city itself, of the western part of the city itself. Today, you will not find Palestinians in West Jerusalem. You can walk around the streets and the markets, and you will find beautiful buildings. Some of them have Arabic writing on them. Actually, some of them, the Palestinian owners of these houses or their children and grandchildren, they go, they look at their house, they take a picture of it. Sometimes they knock at the door, but they are unable to take back the house because the Israeli legal system prevents that. Israel created a law called absentee property law, according to which, which actually gives the a special governmental body called the absentee property custodian the authority to administer and in some cases transfer the ownership of these houses. And the Israeli legal system and including the courts have prevented Palestinians over the past decades from claiming their houses back in the western part of Jerusalem. Next slide, please. In 1967, Israel occupied the eastern part of Jerusalem together with the rest of the West Bank and Gaza. You can see the map on the left, which shows that Israel got control over all of the territory of Palestine, including the West Bank and Gaza. And as soon as they conducted this occupation, Israel demolished 135 houses in the Moroccan quarter of the old city. These are ancient houses. They totally demolished them in order to expand the plaza of the Wailing Wall, basically, which is the western wall of Al-Aqsa Mosque. So they demolished all of these houses, ancient old houses from the Moroccan quarters, and displaced the population. And also they displaced residents from the Jewish quarter, the Palestinian residents who lived in the Jewish quarter. Next slide, please. And at the same time, what Israel did is, in 1967, is that it annexed the eastern part of Jerusalem. This annexation is meant, effectively, that Israel was implementing its domestic legal system in the occupied Palestinian territory, and not all of it in the area that it decided to annex, which is the eastern part of Jerusalem. This includes all of the old city of Jerusalem, as well as a number of other neighborhoods and villages that were originally outside Jerusalem that became part of the newly annexed area. But the most important thing for us today is that this annexation meant that Israel decided to implement its domestic legal system in the eastern part of Jerusalem. Next slide, please. This also meant that Israel decided to so Israel annexed the territory, but it did not really annex the people. What it actually did is that there were Palestinians who were living in the eastern side of Jerusalem. They took a census, and then they decided to give a status of permanent residence to all the Palestinians who lived in this area. This permanent residency status meant that the Palestinians who continued to live in this area were not citizens of Israel, do not get the rights of citizens, but were only residents whose actual presence in the city would allow them to continue living in it. Basically, they introduced a residency revocation policy. This residency revocation policy was based on a number of laws that Israel introduced. At the beginning, Israel used to revoke residencies based on either that if the Palestinian from Jerusalem leaves the area for 7 years or more, or if the Palestinian from Jerusalem gets a permanent residency abroad or gets a citizenship abroad. These were the first conditions according to which the Israeli legal system facilitated the revocation of residency. This continued to be the case until 1994, when Palestinians in Jerusalem, when the peace process started actually, and the Palestinian Authority was established in part of the West Bank, and when the negotiations for the final status of Palestine and Jerusalem were taking place, of course they failed, they never worked, but they were taking place. So during that period, Israel started to speed up its colonial policies, including the residency revocation policy. So Israel invented a new method for residency revocation known as center of life. And according to this method, if Palestinians from Jerusalem do not live within the municipal boundaries of Jerusalem, or in another area where Israel claims its sovereignty, but lives, let's say, in the West Bank or in Gaza Strip, then, or abroad for that matter, then they consider that these people have moved their center of life to outside Israel, the area that they consider under their sovereign territory, and therefore they would they will have their residency revoked as a result of this. After this policy, thousands of Palestinians had their residencies revoked by the Israeli Ministry of Interior, either because they live in the West Bank, or they live in Gaza, or they live abroad, and also as a result of so many of them tried to go back to the Ministry of Interior, tried to reclaim their residency. Many of them failed, but very recently there has been an ability to reclaim or restart your residency status according to a certain Supreme Court decision by the Israeli Ministry of by the Israeli Supreme Court. But we have been, as a center, trying as much as possible to work on this issue to help Palestinians to restart their residency status. Some situations succeed, but many others fail. You will find always that the Ministry of Interior tries as much as possible to find any justification in order to keep these residencies revoked. Next slide, please. Another problem related to this policy is family unification. Israel has greatly restricted family unification between Palestinians in Jerusalem and Palestinians in the West Bank. When Israel occupied the occupied Palestinian territory in 1967, it actually divided the area in different ways. Jerusalem was annexed. However, the rest of the West Bank and Gaza were not annexed, and therefore the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza were given different types of residency permits. But in all cases, according to the Israeli legal system, if a Palestinian from Jerusalem marries a Palestinian from the West Bank or Gaza, they need to apply for family unification in order to live together under the same roof in Jerusalem. However, in 2003, the Israeli parliament enacted a law that prevents a Palestinian from the West Bank or Gaza from getting any permanent residency status in Jerusalem or any other area that Israel assumes its sovereignty on. And therefore, the Palestinians, if successful, they will at best get a temporary permit to stay in Jerusalem. And this temporary permit is very problematic, in fact. If the Palestinian spouse who comes from the West Bank or Gaza or actually 4 other countries, to that matter, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, and Iraq. They also added them to the list, in addition to the West Bank and Gaza. So first I would say, if you marry someone from Gaza, you cannot apply for family unification at all. There is no temporary permit. There is nothing. You either live in Gaza and then lose your own residency status because of the revocation, because you have moved to Gaza, or you go abroad and you also lose your residency status. So if you marry, or you live separately, and there are families, Palestinian families, who have their family members living separately. But also, if you're living separately in Gaza, Gaza is under siege. You cannot freely go there. You need a permit to enter it. You need a permit to exit from it. And Israel does not give this permit frequently. So it is really difficult and complicated to get a permit. And these families don't meet. I've seen family members who only would meet in public holidays. Like there is a family that I know, the husband and wife only met over the past few, over the past decade or more, only met in the holidays, in Easter and Christmas. It's actually a Christian family, so they celebrate Easter and Christmas. So they only met in some Easters and some Christmases. If the father, who was from Gaza, managed to get a permit to enter Jerusalem and visit the rest of his family, wife and children who were in Jerusalem. So it breaks out the family in a great difficult way, unfortunately. So this is the situation if the person is from Gaza. But if the spouse is from the West Bank, you can apply for a permit for them to stay. This permit is temporary. It is dependent. It needs to be renewed every year. And the person who comes from the West Bank is totally dependent on the spouse who is from Jerusalem to continue applying the year after and the year after and the year after. And then if the spouse from Jerusalem passes away, dies, then there is nothing you can do, nobody to actually apply for this family unification process anymore, so the permit will not be renewed. Also, if they get a divorce, even if they have children, by the way, if they get a divorce, it's the same situation. The spouse who is from the West Bank will have to go back to the West Bank, even if they have no house in the West Bank, if they have no place to stay, or in many cases they will be living illegally in Jerusalem, which means without a permit. So this is the complication of the marriage issue. But I should add to this that Israel also greatly restricts residency revocation of child registration of Palestinian children in Jerusalem specifically, especially if a child is born abroad, or if one of the spouses is not a resident of Jerusalem. In such cases, the Israeli legal system prevents the family to register their child, and then the family will have to go through a very complicated bureaucratic process in order to register the child. In some cases, they succeed, and this is something that my center works in. So in some cases, we succeed. We managed to prove that this family is living in Jerusalem and the center of life is in Jerusalem, and therefore managed to register the child. But in some other cases, we fail. The Israeli Ministry of Interior would argue that this family is not living actually in Jerusalem, and therefore they will not register this child. Or that they lived for a certain period in the West Bank, and therefore they need a much more complicated process in order to register the child. And therefore, we have thousands of children who are not registered, either where they have an application pending in the Ministry of Interior, or rejected applications for that matter, or that they don't have an application in the first place. Many Palestinian children who are born abroad have never even started the process of child registration. and therefore it becomes much more complicated and difficult for them if they grow up and become older, 14 years old if they lived in the West Bank, or 18 years old if they lived in other places around the world. In that case, they would lose their right to be registered in the population registry. And there are children who grew up to adulthood who have no legal status at all. There are several people in Jerusalem, living in Jerusalem, but have no legal status. The Israeli Ministry of Interior denied their child registration application, and therefore denied them any status. So they live and they have no ID card, they have no passport, they cannot travel, they cannot open a bank account, they cannot cash checks even if they work. So they live a very, very complicated life. And according to the current Israeli system that applies on them, they are unable to resolve this issue and get a proper registration. This is very sad. We see a lot of humanitarian cases, I would say, of Palestinians who have no registration, and this is blocking their lives, including, for example, marriage options. Just the simple thing of being able to marry normally, to work normally, to live normally. It's very difficult for these people. Next slide, please. I talked about residency revocation earlier in the slide before, and here I need to tell you about the more recent policy for residency revocation. I mentioned before that Israel used several criteria: center of life, being abroad for 7 years, getting a residency abroad and citizenship abroad as justifications for residency revocation. But what is important here also to mention is that in 2006, a Palestinian election took place, and there were a number of Palestinians who were elected for the Palestinian Legislative Council representing Jerusalem. When this happened, the Israeli Ministry of Interior decided to revoke the residencies of 4 Palestinians who won in the elections, saying that they have breached their allegiance to the state of Israel by being elected in a foreign parliament, and also by belonging to a group and that Israel saw as a terrorist group. So they revoked their residency status and left them without status at all. These people, the parliamentarians and the minister also, they went to the Israeli Supreme Court and they filed a case saying that basically the main argument was that Israeli law at the time did not allow for residency revocation based on breach of allegiance to the state of Israel. And the court said after 11 years of examining this case that indeed that was the situation. However, that the revocation was illegal at the time. However, it gave the Israeli government the opportunity to go and legislate. That was like the guidance of the court, to go to the Knesset, to the parliament, and legislate a law that allows this revocation. And it kept the revocation of these residencies as well as some other residency statuses that had been revoked. It kept them pending. It kept the revocation, actually. It did not cancel or annul this revocation of residency. And indeed, in a very short period of time, in 6 months, the Israeli government managed to get the Israeli parliament to legislate a law that allows residency revocation based on breach of allegiance. And actually, at the end of 2022, there was an important case of a Palestinian human rights defender who worked in a Palestinian human rights organization called Al-Damir, who had his residency revoked based on breach of allegiance. And because he had a French citizenship, Israel managed to put him on a plane forcibly after he exhausted all the ways that he could in order to get any court order for him not to be deported. Eventually, the Israeli courts allowed his deportation, and Israel forced him on a plane and sent him to France because he has a French citizenship. So now, according to Israel, this man has no relationship to Jerusalem, no legal relationship to Jerusalem, and his residency has been revoked. His name is Salah Hamouri. Of course, you can expand on his case if you Google him, and you'll find a lot of information about his case. Next slide, please. Another measure that Israel has taken is that it has built a wall in the area in Jerusalem between the city and the neighborhoods surrounding it. This specific segment that you can see, this picture was taken while the wall was being built between in a place that separates between where I live and where I work, my university. So now my university main campus is on one side of the wall, and my house is on another side of the wall. And of course, this wall has separated many families. But what is also important to mention is that there are 120,000 Palestinians from Jerusalem living outside this wall in an area that Israel still considers part of the Jerusalem municipal territory. And these people are, of course, finding difficulty accessing a lot of rights and a lot of services in Jerusalem as a result of this wall. However, in addition to this, and that's very important, there are campaigns within the Israeli political arena to consider that these areas that are on the other side of the wall, that they are outside Jerusalem, and that if that happens, many Palestinians, this number of Palestinians, this estimation, the 120,000 residents would probably lose their residency status. This is something that we are very much worried about, especially that the areas that are on the other side of the wall, they have gathered many people living there. Because especially in families where there is one spouse from Jerusalem and the other spouse who's from the West Bank, they find it comfortable to live in an area where the spouse from the West Bank does not need a permit to live, right? Because it's on the other side of the wall, so they don't need a permit, so they live there easily, and then they apply for family unification or child registration while they are living in a place where they do not need a permit initially to apply. Next slide, please. Another policy that is also very important is the policy of zoning and planning in Jerusalem. After the occupation of the eastern side of Jerusalem, Israel zoned the city in a way that encourages Israeli Jewish-only settlements to be built in the city. 35% of the total area was expropriated for building Israeli settlements. You know, whole mountains and regions were expropriated for this method, for this purpose. And indeed, the Israeli governments over the past decades have built several Israeli settlements. Another 22% of the land were designated as green areas, which mean that these areas are Palestinians are, nobody is allowed to build on these areas because it would be illegal to do that because there are green areas according to the zoning, and 30% of the land was not planned at all, which means also it is illegal to build on it. So Palestinian, only 13% of the land was available for building, and it was already built. So basically what the Israeli zoning policy was to limit the areas on which Palestinians could build and maximize the areas on which the Jewish population builds or the government builds for the Jewish population. This meant that Palestinians, many Palestinians actually built on their own lands, built new houses on their own lands, but these houses were seen as illegal. Next slide, please. They were seen as illegal. It was very difficult for it's very difficult for Palestinians to get a permit to live in Jerusalem. It's very expensive, even if your land is designated as an area for residential construction. It's very expensive to get a permit. And of course, the Palestinian population of Jerusalem lives under the poverty line. 75% of them live under the poverty line. So Palestinians were not going to find the funds to, to apply for a permit, even if they can. And in many cases, they cannot because the area is not zoned for that purpose. This means that there are around 60,000 people estimated to be at the risk of having their homes demolished in Jerusalem based on this justification that they have built without a permit. We have been representing Palestinians who did that, and the maximum usually we can get is that the court allows to postpone the demolition, but the lives of Palestinians who have had their homes demolished or at risk of demolition also becomes very difficult. Next slide, please. In addition to that, there is a policy of collective punishment that Israel uses. And again, like everything else, what the Israeli government does in these cases is another method of displacement. This woman, her name is Sarah Dwayat from Sur Baher. Sur Baher is a neighborhood in Jerusalem. Her son was accused of throwing a stone at a moving vehicle, which led to the death of the driver. As soon as he was accused of this crime, even before he was convicted, his mother and sister who lived in their house were told that they will have to leave this house. And indeed, the Israeli government came and sealed the house. You can see the door in the picture, welded and with an iron bar also closing it, and the same with all the windows and any other door in the house, because as a collective punishment. They actually went to her and told her that this is a collective punishment, or that this is a punishment so that other people will learn and not throw stones or do other similar actions. So until today, this lady is unable to live in her house, and she's poor. She's unable to finding a lot of difficulties paying rent or finding a different place, but she was forcibly displaced out of her house until the current day. Every year she gets a property tax bill from the Israeli Jerusalem municipality for her to pay that bill, and we always give her the service, the legal service of arguing to the municipality that she is unable to live in her house because of the Israeli government policy that was approved by the Israeli court system, and therefore it's not fair for her to pay this tax if she's unable to use the house and if the house is actually sealed by the Israeli government. So this is one way of collective punishment. And next slide. The other one is demolition. This is also a house that was demolished for this woman and her children, also based on an attack that her husband conducted a shooting attack, and therefore they punished her and her children despite the fact that her husband was killed on that incident. So what further punishment can you punish a person more than killing that person? But this is the actual thing that happened. They shot the man dead on the incident, and then they started a whole collective punishment policy on his family. This is very common, and the Israeli Supreme Court has frequently authorized these collective punishment measures like home demolition and home sealing also, welding and sealing the homes. Today, the Israeli government is expanding the methods of collective punishment, and all of them are also aiming at more residency revocations. We have represented a case where a Palestinian has had his family unification permit denied, even after living in Jerusalem for several years, because the half-uncle of his wife was accused of ramming soldiers with his truck. Right? This is a case that we are representing in the Israeli court system. So what I'm trying to say here is that the methods of collective punishment are increasing, and these methods of collective punishment focus on deportation, displacement, transfer, moving people out of their homes, also going with the same policy that has started since 1948. Next slide, please. Here we find also another group of women who are suffering from collective punishment. It's a group of women who protest against Israeli settlers and soldiers and police members coming to the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And the Israeli authorities frequently start by revoking their membership in the social welfare system, which we pay taxes for, and the medical insurance system, which we all pay taxes for as well, and they themselves pay taxes for all of their lives, only because these women were protesting peacefully against the Israeli police and army and settlers and extremists entering Al-Aqsa Mosque. Next slide, please. So my presentation certainly, and the time that I have, certainly cannot cover all of the measures of collective punishment, but of displacement. But I should draw your attention that we have this infographic, which I can also send if I haven't. I think I haven't already sent it. And this infographic shows and explains a number of policies like child registration and family unification and residency revocation and home demolition, all of that. But at the same time, it also shows how Israel treats the Jewish population at the same time. So while the Palestinians are suffering from all of this, the Israeli Jewish population does not face these types of measures, but at the same time they face an encouragement. For example, Israel gives the right to any Jew from anywhere around the world to immigrate to Israel, and once they immigrate, they can live in any place they like. They can live in Jerusalem, they can live in settlements in Jerusalem, settlements in the West Bank, settlements in in any place, or freely. But not only this. And then they get citizenship and all of that. But not only this, also if according to Israeli law, they can also invite, there is a right to return according to the Israeli law. They call it return, right to immigration to Israel, that is given to the parents of the Jew, as it is defined by the Israeli law, the grandparents of the Jew, the children of the Jew, the grandchildren of the Jew, and siblings and spouses and all of that. So this is a right for Jews only. And in addition to that, if a Jewish couple are present according to, using a tourist visa to, 1 second, key?
No, you don't need a key.
No need for a key?
Yeah, just close the door.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, thank you. So if that person, if this couple is present in Jerusalem based on a tourist visa, they are there on a tourist visa, and they have a child while on a tourist visa, and I'm saying visa because we live in Jerusalem according to a visa, but visa of permanent resident. But even if they are there in Jerusalem on a tourist visa, in such a case, the child that is born in Israel, including in occupied Jerusalem, will be automatically an Israeli citizen. So this whole issue that I talked about with child registration restrictions that the Palestinians have to suffer from, but despite the fact that they are permanent residents, according to the way they are defined in the Israeli legal system, the Israeli Jewish population, the international Jewish population, even tourists do not face. They will have their children registered as residents automatically. And this is, this will show also partly how, or the rightfulness of the description of the Israeli regime that is ruling over Palestine as an apartheid regime, and the commitment that the Israeli government is committing the crime of apartheid. This different treatment of Palestinians and Jews in the Israeli legal system is colonial. It is working on changing the demography. This is the main goal of it, and it does amount to apartheid, as clarified by different human rights organizations, including Al-Haq, Beit Salem, an Israeli human rights organization, Yesh Din, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, etc. And there are more and more organizations, clarifying this position today. Next slide, please. So the Israeli policies, these two pictures are pictures of, on the left, there is someone who was running for elections, and his the slogans of his election campaign is transfer. If you read the word here in Hebrew, it's a party that was called Moledet. Now it doesn't exist, but there are more extreme right-wing groups now in the Knesset also. But his plan and what he went to elections with was transfer. This is what he's running to the Israeli Knesset elections with, because it seems that this shows as an attractive symbol and plan for many people. You can see also how the expulsion in the picture on the right, certainly something you will find in slogans of right-wing people who have been able to to reach the government, and the current government is full of these right-wing fundamentalists who want to continue transferring us and to escalate it. Next slide, please. But at the end of the day, the Palestinian population believes in continuing to live on our land, resisting. We believe that we are rooted, as you can see in the cartoon on the right, that we are rooted. We always try our best and do all of our efforts in order not to be displaced, to stay in our lands. And this is in itself sumud, resilience. This in itself, we find it as the best resistance we can do, to stay in our lands, to stay in our houses. But also, as the picture on the left shows, this is a Palestinian refugee carrying the keys to his house that he was displaced from. So Palestinian refugees and displaced persons still work on the right of return. That's their demand, and they want to return. Thank you very much, and I am happy to go to the Q&A session.
We're still waiting for Nanci. Well, thank both of you, Nanci and Munir, for your presentations. Of course, they're very different situations, and we'll now have the opportunity for Clara to inform you and pass to each of you the questions from the students. Thank you, Clara.
Thank you very much. Obrigada a todos, todas e todos que estão presentes aqui hoje, nesse 11º encontro que estamos fazendo desse curso. First, I need to thank everyone who is here today. Today is our 11th class, and I believe that all the themes have been very rich, and the participation of all those present in the classes is something very positive for our meeting. Thank you very much, Nanci and Professor Munir, for accepting to be with us today, talking about such an important subject that involves the process of gentrification of cities through the analysis of two different territorial contexts, but which are very connected. I kept thinking about the connections that the prospect of ethnic cleansing is also part of a process of social stratification in apartheid. And it seems important to me to point out that this week marks the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, a catastrophe that today makes technically 25% of the world refugee population to be made up of Palestinians. So it's very opportune that today we are discussing the parallels between the reality of homelessness and the exile of thousands of people as a political project. And now I will start the moment to ask some questions. I will try to speak slowly, so if you need me to repeat, please let me know. Some questions are more directed to Nanci or others to Professor Munir, but two of you can answer if you wish. Okay. And now the first question is directed to Nanci. Nanci, essa pergunta eu vou falar em português, depois eu traduzo. Fala um pouco sobre outras ocupações que existem, né, em São Paulo, no Brasil, e que podem ter uma relação, né, com a Brasil-Palestina, para além das que você mencionou, né? Traduzindo agora, Nanci, we had a question about Leila Khaled occupation. Do you know if this name chosen because of its proximity to the Palestinian left wing? Are there other occupations that relate situations in Brazil to Palestine?
Ok, eu vou responder em português primeiro, vou pedir já que você fez em português, para as pessoas ouvirem também, e pedir para o Lourenço me ajudar aqui depois. Essa escolha desse nome tem a ver com uma proximidade da luta entre os palestinos e as pessoas que são excluídas aqui no Brasil, em São Paulo, em todo o Brasil. Então, aqui a exclusão é mais econômica e social, diferente um pouco da questão da Palestina, e a escolha do nome teve teve esse momento histórico político no Brasil, do maior suporte do governo, uma maior proximidade em relação à Palestina, e também com o dia de entrada no terreno da ocupação, foi o dia da solidariedade ao povo palestino. As outras ocupações do MTST, em São Paulo e no Brasil, elas têm todas essa característica de juntar pessoas excluídas da moradia e dos direitos sociais para poder lutar por um direito básico, um direito humano básico, que é negado. Então, a proximidade ela está nessa forma de luta, né, de resistir e de buscar os seus direitos. Então, o povo palestino é brutalmente excluído por Israel e sem nem expressar a violência que esse povo vive. E aqui a gente tem essa luta irmã, né? Vou pedir para o Lourenço agora traduzir para facilitar.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm also from MTST. Nanci has told us that the name choosing, it was due to the historical moment of diplomatic international relations of Brazil in solidarity of Palestine. We all in the left movement are very sensible to the Palestine question since ever, and so it is a very important reference for a worldwide struggle. The life in our occupations seems in many ways similar to the ways of living of those excluded in the Palestinian and in other situations around the world. And we try to gather together people who are excluded from basic human rights. So the situation of the Palestinian people, we understand that it's a very brutal situation of exclusion. In Brazil, it's more of a social and an economic. It's a different situation, but it's also a more subtle way of ethnic cleansing, one way or another, an exclusion from our cities, from the center of the cities, and always towards the periphery. So that's it. The name of the occupation was due to the coincidence of the day of the Palestinian struggle also, but it remains an important reference for us. That's it.
Here we cleansing. We have the cameras in
the military police.
Military police reduce the killing of teenagers in São Paulo.
Yes, it's an informal situation, but the killing of black young people in Brazil, in São Paulo, by the military police is a very strong issue. And since they have started having these cameras on their uniforms, the killings have dropped dramatically. So it's
many militants, many people from MTST had children killed by the police here.
Thank you. Obrigada pela resposta. Very important what you said about this issue. So let's do the second question. Is there any inspiration from international movements such as the MTST for the struggle for housing in Palestine? Are there international cooperation between housing organizations? I think both can answer.
O movimento surgiu dessa ligação com o MST. As estratégias foram separadas por conta do tipo de luta que o MST e o MTST fazem. Existem, depois da criação do MTST, existem intercâmbios de conhecimento, de reconhecimento com movimentos da África do Sul. A gente tem também agora o movimento dos sem direito, que são trabalhadores informais, que surgiu a partir do MTST, e a gente tem intercâmbios também em outros países, como Colômbia e Argentina. Então, são trocas de experiências que vêm acontecendo. O movimento atua de uma forma independente, mas procura trocar experiências com outros movimentos de moradia do mundo e movimentos de trabalhadores excluídos, trabalhadores informais e pessoas que estão nessa exclusão social e de moradia.
So, we from the movement, the MTST, since we have departed from the landless workers movement, we are still in very cool relations, interesting relations with them and with other movements all around the world. I think we see it as very important to exchange knowledge of methods and of working methods all around the world, in Latin America, but also with the movements in Palestine and in other parts of the world. The movement has a special part of international relations that does this.
Thank you very much, Professor Munir. If you want to complement with talking about some cooperation with organization, your mic is on mute.
Yes, sorry. What do you want me to comment on, please?
No, only if you want to.
Excuse me, Clara. Excuse me. She was asking if you want to comment on any type of cooperation between your human rights clinic, your organizations, Al-Haq, and other organizations for human rights and to protect homing and housing, etc., in the world, about cooperations.
Yes, there is a lot of cooperation with the world. Not necessarily. I am not aware of specific cooperation, for example, in Brazil, and I'm happy today to learn about the work the great work that you are doing in Brazil. But yes, there is a lot of cooperation, and this cooperation, for example, me as an academic, I do have academic cooperation with different professors and universities, and many other academics have the same, whether it is based on research or based on advocacy. This is all happening also with the help of many other organizations and in the world. But also I know that the Palestinian civil society is very active. It always has important links with partners from different places around the world. And I believe this is very important. In fact, the support that justice can get from international civil society is very important. It gets the word through. It gets us to reach our goals and to advance the justice cause in a much faster way. So yes, certainly.
Thank you, Professor. And now we had a question by Luis Henrique Junqueira, and he asks, how does the UN Human Rights Council and UNESCO, among other agencies, deal with family removal and house demolition in Jerusalem, such as the case of the Maghreb neighborhood?
Yes, I'm actually today talking from New York. I am in New York for the United Nations, for some advocacy and work related to the United Nations headquarters in New York. But I also am involved with the Human Rights Council, and yes, the Human Rights Council, the General Assembly, even the Security Council of the United Nations have very frequently condemned the home demolitions, the settlements, and the displacement of Palestinians. This is happening every year, by the way. Every year there is a condemnation. But not only that, we have special rapporteurs who have been examining this for the past few decades and documenting it well. And we have a special committee from the UN that is investigating and documenting and reporting. So the information is out there. Everybody knows it. It's being condemned quite frequently by the international community. We have mechanisms following it up, but then we always face the problem of actual accountability. Okay, we all know now the facts. What happens next? And this is where we are stuck, actually. Once we get to demanding measures for accountability, prosecution for people who commit war crimes and crimes against humanity, or measures taken against the state of Israel until it abides by international law and stops this, these crimes. Because, forced displacement in occupied territory is a crime. Building settlement in occupied territory is a crime in international law. So they are really serious violations of international law, and they are well documented and well reported and well condemned. But then there are no measures, and this is where we are stuck. We want to see measures, concrete measures, and if concrete measures start to actually take place, I think we will go to a totally different place, and Israel will understand that it cannot continue doing this forever, and policy will change. But Israel has been shielded by the international community that is unwilling to intervene in any way.
Thank you, Professor. And let me see other question. Natalia Geraldine Sabat asks, is there any kind of public policies that aims the protection of historic buildings in Palestine?
Yes, there are. But when Israel demolished the Moroccan Quarter, and you saw the pictures, these ancient houses, they did it immediately while the war is still happening, like immediately after, basically. So they took advantage of the war in order to demolish the whole neighborhood. Now, it will be much more difficult to demolish houses that old, because the Israeli law itself actually prohibits demolishing old houses. But what they do now is they try to, in many cases, to force the Palestinian population, residents of the houses, out and exchange them with Jewish residents. And this is a situation that we keep seeing around us in the old city of Jerusalem, but also in the newer neighborhoods. When I say the old city of Jerusalem, I'm talking about a city that is thousands of years old. And the newer one is maybe, the houses are also old, like, could be 200 years, 150 years. This is like, and more recent, of course, but, Jerusalem is an ancient city. So yes, there are laws. It will be much more difficult today to demolish, but they took advantage of the war because they wanted to expand the plaza of the Wailing Wall, so that there is much bigger space for Jewish prayer in that area.
Thank you, Professor. And let me see if we have other questions. And Rafael, for our team, asks, how is the case for family reunification for Palestinians with blue IDs living in Area C in the West Bank, such as Kalandia and other space?
Yes. So usually it is the Palestinian with a blue ID, that is a Palestinian who has the Israeli residency status, who invites their spouse who has a green ID card, and that is a Palestinian who is from the West Bank, has a West Bank residency status, to live together in an Israeli area. The other way around is not doesn't happen. There is no Palestinian from Jerusalem who will go to live in Area C or in areas that are outside the municipal area territory of Jerusalem, or the areas where Israel assumes its sovereign territory. Because if you go basically to the West Bank, in very simple terms, Israel will claim that you have moved your center of life to outside Israel, and therefore you will lose your residency status. So even, and this also shows you the apartheid here. There are many Jews living in the West Bank, in Area C, in settlements that were built for them, built for the Jewish population, Jewish Israeli population. They are living there, enjoying all the rights that they would enjoy if they lived in areas under Israeli sovereignty. They participate in the social welfare, they pay the taxes, they receive the benefits, they have medical insurance, they have all the benefits of a resident in Israel. So they're not considered, for that matter, living abroad. But if I go and live in the West Bank, not only will I lose my social welfare subscription and medical insurance subscription, but also I will lose my residency status. It will be revoked. So basically, especially Palestinians from Jerusalem, because of the status, they avoid living in the West Bank unless they are forced to, unless they have no house, no other place. But you can see, if there are neighborhoods like near Qalandia, actually, that was mentioned in the question, the Kufr Aqab and Semiramis, the ones that I talked about them, that they are behind the wall. There are neighborhoods that are stuffed with Palestinians. There are buildings of 12 and 15 and 17 and 20 floors that are built without permits, by the way, most of them, without any permit, without any zoning and planning, without any good services in these areas for the people, but only built for the only reason that they are inside the municipal boundaries of Jerusalem, even though they are outside the wall, but they are inside the municipal boundaries of Jerusalem. And therefore, the Palestinians who live there can continue to say that my center of life is in Israel, according to the Israeli definitions. So many Palestinians move there, and especially with the mixed marriages of green ID card and blue ID card people, they like to live in these areas because they are forced in a way to live in these areas. They are not pleasant areas. They are very crowded and with no services, and it's not. These are not pleasant areas to live in. However, some people are forced to live there in order to keep the residency status of the one who has a blue ID card, to be able to pass the status to the children, without having the spouse who has a green ID card looked at home. There are many families who, once they get married and the spouse from the West Bank comes to Jerusalem and still does not have a permit, basically they have to lock themselves at home and, or risk movement, move with the risk of being caught and being transferred outside Jerusalem by the police, and also punished. One of the restrictions that Israel built when they built the wall, the legal restrictions, is you are not allowed to carry in your car, in your vehicle, a Palestinian from the West Bank who does not have a permit to be in Israel. So if your wife or your husband or your father or your mother has a West Bank ID card, and they are and you're carrying them in your own car, and you have a blue ID card, you are actually committing a crime. It's a crime in Israeli law. So this is the apartheid that we're living in. It is the criminalization of the most simple things, and this is what is creating new areas like Kufur Aqab, and Shafat refugee camp, by the way, is also a very crowded area where many Palestinians are forced to live also as a result of these measures.
Was that the last question, Clara?
Yes, thank you very much. Professor Arlene, you can ask if you want the last questions. We are finished our class. So thank you very much one more time, Professor Munir, Nancy, and all the students.
Yeah, thanks, Clara. Well, this is like the fourth class in which we have put side by side Munir and Nanci experiences in Brazil and Palestine about topics that in some way or another we find certain points of identification. You know? Watching your expositions, what really struck me was, you know, how profound, you know, how deep it was to listen to the people you interviewed, Nanci, in the occupation, New Palestine village occupation. They were talking about human suffering, you know? And when they were talking about human suffering, even if the political situation is so different, so diverse from Brazil in relation to Palestine, we see how in this aspect of they really touch. You know, they are experiences, and so we understand how that these people feel that the name that they gave to the occupation to their occupation in Vila is legitimate. You know, it's a new Palestine. They feel that they are living in a type of Gaza Strip, as they described it in the interviews. No? And also, Munir, we also had a class, the last class, talking about the MST, the movement that the MTST came from. And in that class, they explained how the term occupation should not confuse us, no, because they are completely different. When we talk about occupation here, it is the opposite of occupation, of the Israeli occupation, which is occupation depriving people of their rights. And here it's an occupation struggling for their rights. No? And so I'd like to ask Nanci, now that you've heard Munir's exposition and all this, you know, that the MTST, Munir, today has representatives in parliament. The leader has been practically, you know, running for president. It's an important movement in Brazil. You know, it's a movement that I would like to know, Nanci, if you have any perspectives of how you could, on the international level, of how you could do more for Palestine, for this which unites you, for the human suffering that you identify so much with. What could be your actions of the MTST to tackle a problem which in Palestine is essentially a political problem, no?
Bom, visto que a gente tem representantes no Congresso, eu acho que é um caminho importante para reforçar o apoio do Brasil à Palestina, à causa palestina. A gente, nesse momento, vive grandes dificuldades. A gente vai ter uma CPI, uma investigation about MST in the Congress started yesterday. So we have many problems, but I think any kind of opportunity to help Palestine, I think we will help. And I will show inclusive my T-shirt. It's the coordination of the new Vila Nova Palestina sell it to help, to support the occupation and to support the Palestinians too.
Wonderful, Nanci. So with yes, it's you face problems in the movement, but you have also your strengths, absolutely, in Congress. And Munir, what would be your what idea? What kind of initiative do you think could come from Brazil? We're talking about movements, the MTST, they have representatives in parliament. They have structures of power in Brazil, and they have structures of power in the people. What could be the initiatives to bring these movements closer to demanding a justice for Palestine?
Look, currently as a human rights movement in Palestine, we are working and hoping that a number of things will be established. We want accountability. We want justice. And most of the accountability we're looking for as a human rights community comes from abroad, right? It comes from the international community. Brazil is certainly a very important country. It's a strong and big country in Latin America, and it can, of course, influence the region in many ways. And of course, the parliament will inform or will advise and pressure also foreign policy of the state. We really need support for first recognizing and declaring publicly that the apartheid reports have been published recently. Not every state in the world is using the language yet, is expressing that this is an apartheid system that needs to change fundamentally. From my point of view, and I believe the point of view of many others in the human rights community, it is very important that that more and more countries are expressing this explicitly, and therefore also demanding accountability, and at the same time also exercising their own measures against Israel until it stops these violations. So I believe a lot can come out of the movement, basically observing the policies. I should admit I haven't really followed very closely what Brazil's positions are today in, let's say, the UN or other places regarding, for example, apartheid or all of that. But I believe it is very important. This is maybe something we could examine together and think about together and take forward. And I'll be honored to be your friend and your partner in seeking justice for Palestine and for Brazil and for all those who are oppressed around the world, because indeed injustices like each other. The oppressive people, they like each other and they support each other, and I can see that very closely. I saw, for example, when Donald Trump took the position in the US here, how he became very supportive, not only of Israel, but of many other oppressive regimes around the world. And I can see how the right-wing people in different places are supporting each other as well, which is weird. Like, all right-wing people, they think of them as the best, but at the same time, they are supporting other right-wing groups. So there is, I can see that happening in many cases, and I think that the alliance and friendship of human rights defenders and people who are struggling for all different forms of justice, social justice, political and self-determination, like our case, and all of the other, is very important. So I'm honored to be your friend and your partner in struggling for justice.
Great, we'll exchange those contacts there. Munir, just to finish, our next class is going to be by our colleague Bashir about the one state, two state. What is your vision from your position? What is your vision for way towards a solution in Palestine in terms of state organization?
Yeah, look, my personal position is certainly that I would like to end up with one state rather than two states. Of course, today we are living a one-state reality that Israel is ruling from the river to the sea, but we are also living the two-states reality at the same time, by the way. So Palestine is a state recognized by the international community as such, acting as such, despite the fact that it is not independent, it is occupied, it is controlled by Israel, but still it has the status of a state in the international arena. And so we are currently in a certain confusion between one state and two states at the same time. This is the current situation, but it is oppression. It's an oppressive regime, one government, one army ruling from the whole territory. My vision stems from my human rights background. I really believe in human rights. I don't just work in human rights. I believe that we are all equal, that we can all share power together. We can all serve our interests together, whether you're Jewish, you're Palestinian, whatever your ethnic origin, whatever your religion, whatever your color is, people can work together, can live together, and can develop together. It's not one versus the, it shouldn't be one versus the other. So I believe in a state that has, that's not really a national state for one group or the other, but one simple democratic state for everyone. I should mention that there are several models that people have thought about for the one state first. Those who believe in one state, there are several models. I know Bashir is subscribed to a certain model and type. I am also, I believe in a different one. They are very close and similar to each other, but there are some slight differences here and there. I believe more of in a simple state that has, that allows everybody to be living equally. And allows all the refugees to return, very important, to return to their homes in what became Israel in 1948, and then to live equally and to decide, to determine our future together as a Palestinian and Jewish population. And of course, making sure that everybody is safe and secure and that property is safe and, everything, that's very important. But I believe that everybody should be equal, basically.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much, Munir, Nancy. So maybe we can keep in touch. It's been very wonderful to listen to your explanation about the very important MTST movement. Munir, whenever there's a demonstration here in Brazil, a large demonstration for Palestine, the MTST is there. They're always present. They're always together. So thank you both, and Clara, thank you so much for organizing and the whole support team for this class and the students. See you next Thursday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.